And we'll let the light adjust. Also, the sound is going to be not great. We'll washed out in the background there. I think we're doing great here. And another remote. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do 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 do. Steady dee 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 dee. Run up 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 up. It's this one. Hey, I was adjusting my collar there. Still never works. This always sticks up. I look like Chris Farley on Letterman. Guess what I've been watching a lot on YouTube lately. Hi, how's it going? How would you like some picks of the week? Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da. I sure would. Well, gosh, Aru. Why, it's been an eventful couple of weeks. I don't think I mentioned it last week, in fact, but I am now officially working full-time at the Funny Book Store. That's Galaxy of Comics in beautiful Van Nuys, California, the Tony Lake Balboa neighborhood. Louise and Satakoy, why don't you come on by Monday through Friday? Preferably after 4 or 5 when I've left. And I've been here in Long Beach, California. Long Beach, where if you don't like the smell, just wait a couple minutes. That's my little joke that I wrote several times on this trip. It stinks down here. I don't know if you've been to Long Beach lately. P.U. Whatever. A couple extra bones. It just makes my commute to the comic book store, like if you ever played, what was that game? Aggie, what was that game? It's the cat I'm house sitting. Oregon Trail. And pioneers would cross the vast wilderness of the Old West. That's more or less what they had to go to the comic shop. They got to go to the comic shop every day. It's a long commute is what I'm saying. And also, since I haven't been home since last Friday, I haven't really got a lot of comics this week because I'm just going to have to pack them into my suitcase and take them home anyway. But I'd run out of room almost immediately. So, all right, we'll go. I don't know what the hell all that was in aid of. I specifically, though, today, I did buy a few books because it is Wednesday after all. But I was like, there's like a lot of the Marvel stuff that came out this week I left because my stack is at home too. So I'm like 2 weeks behind now. I'm probably not going to get another real go at that to read stack until a week from Saturday. Ugh. Because I'm going to be here till Monday. And then it's back to the grindstone. So in the meantime, though, I did buy a few things that aren't going to have any effect on canon whatsoever. So these first two, I believe, came out last Wednesday. But as far as you know, who cares? First up, we have Count Crowley, Amateur Midnight Monster Hunter #1 from Dark Horse Comics. I don't recognize any of the names on the creative team here, but it looked interesting enough. I mean, you do something even vaguely bronzy, agey looking nowadays, meaning the 70s, I'm going to be on board. So this looks like a big, stupid, over-the-top. These guys probably listened to a lot of Alice Cooper while they were doing it, and that's enough for me. Also, in a very, very similar vein, Pentagram of Horror #1 from Black Caravan. My Own Hell is the subtitle on this. I don't know. It looked evil enough. It had enough pentagrams on it that I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. I did look at it, little peek into my process. Every Saturday morning I look at the previews website to see what's going to be coming out the following Wednesday, and I write down all the books that I want and the ones that I'm interested in. Oh, that's nice. I wish I hadn't looked through that now. The ones I might be interested in, I'll put like a question mark or something by it. And I think with that particular title, I looked at it and then I was like, nah. Because I really do need to kind of cut back. I don't need to be getting everything. But at the same time, one of the many upsides of working full-time at a comic shop, I've never actually worked full-time at a comic shop. I've worked at a comic shop for most of my life, but at one point or another. But Never full-time. And not for a lack of trying, might I add. Right? This guy knows what I'm talking about. Here comes the drama queen. Oh, is the camera on? The cat, not me. I do that also. I have not talked a lot, honestly, because I don't really care that much, but I've not talked a lot about how I left my job at San Diego Comics, which could have been worse. It could have been I could have made a bigger deal out of it, and I was tempted to be quite honest. I think the main reason I haven't even really mentioned anything about it is because I don't want to even lend credence to the former final owner of that comic book store, because he's a real dildo. And I don't know that he'll ever see this or hear it, and I don't fucking give a shit either, because he's one of the few people that I wouldn't be afraid of nor upset if he found out I didn't like him. Oh, I'm sorry. How rude of us to record the show on the cat's dining room table. So anyway, I just feel like no one takes me seriously. Hi, this is Agatha Catsy. No, I didn't name her, as a matter of fact. This is her anus. She wants to make sure I get a good, healthy look at it. I'm also her proctologist. I'd rather talk about a cat's anus than my old job, I guess, is what I'm saying. But one of the many reasons that I hate that guy is because there was a full-time slot that opened up at San Diego Comics whilst I was employed there. And the guy screwed me out of it, basically. So, but now that I was so mad about it, I couldn't even think about it. And that was near on to 10 years ago now. Jesus H. Christ. That was 10 years ago. Oy. My path took me a different way and ended up working full-time in a comic shop anyway, so I guess I shouldn't be too mad at it. But frankly, I just don't like getting fucked over by a guy whose teeth are worse than mine. Anyway. So one of the things about working full-time at a comic shop is I can try new stuff with a minimum of risk, really. And now that now that my income stream is also the same as my comic book stream, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, I can spend this much today and this little the next day and whatever else. And I'm going, and it's like now there is that intensity. I do like staying on top of every week's comics. Obviously, is actually the main reason I do this is to sort of keep myself on top of, because I can let my stack go for months at a time. I have before. Sorry, I'm still a little loopy from my 9-hour commute. So, advantage of working. Oh, right. So there's not the pressure though either. Like my locker is already full of books, but my boss, as bosses before him, I would get a huge stack in my pole, but they'd be like, well, if anybody's going to get all of those comics eventually, it's Jimmy. So pressure's off a little bit. Thank God. This is the one I kind of went through these first two because I don't know anything about them. I'll have more to say after I read them. But this is the big one for this week. This is Hulk Grand Design #1 by Jim Rugg. This cover, however, is done by Edpiscoura, tribute to... Oh, shit. What number Incredible Hulk is that? 317? I should look it up. It's a tribute to a Todd McFarlane cover when Todd McFarlane drew Incredible Hulk as written by Peter David. And the inside story also... I'm really at a loss for words. Incredible Hulk number 340. That's what this is a tribute to. Although on the cover of that book, Wolverine was not wearing his very, very first costume. This is Edpiscoura being very Edpiscoura. Okay, so the Grand Design series. I don't think I've mentioned these. No, I don't know that they would have ever come up because they started before I started doing this little thing. So back, I want to say in 2017, maybe in 2016. Yeah, that sounds right. Edpiscoura drew a book called XMen Grand Design. And Edpiscoura is a cartoonist from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And his big entree into comics was a book called Hip Hop Family Tree, which is one of my favorite comics of all time. And I even wrote an article about it once. It not only covers early hip hop history, the era that I tend to be most interested in, it was also drawn very consciously. I mean, Edpiscoura is already just a really good cartoonist. I had actually known Edpiscoura before that. He did a book with Harvey Pekar called The Beats, about all the beatnik poets of the 50s, which I can give two shits about. But if Harvey Pekar is going to write about it, I'm going to listen. Harvey loved jazz, too, and I hate jazz, but I would read a book of jazz reviews or bios by him. That's how much I enjoyed his work. I digress. So Edpiscoura blew up. Edpiscoura was one of Harvey's kind of proteges. Harvey had a lot of guys like that. Harvey Pekar, if you're not familiar, created a comic book in the 70s or early 80s called American Splendor, which was made into a film starring Paul Giamatti, and one of his absolute, out of a stellar career, one of the brightest lights in that firmament. Oh, that was pretty good. Might be a little tongue-tied, but I still have my knack for figurative language. What's that like? I don't know. So yeah, and then so American Splendor was his biggest thing, but he also did a lot of other comics over the years, and one of his things that he would often do was work with new cartoonists. He didn't draw anything himself, Harvey. He wrote everything. And it was his own inimitable, because it was all autobiographical for the most part. And so in his own very curmudgeonly, Cleveland-y style. But he worked with guys like Edpiscoura to kind of get them, going. And so Edpiscoura drawn Hip Hop Family Tree for Boing Boing, which is a website that I think still exists. That was where I had first been made aware of it. And I was into it, but the fact that it wasn't in a paper thing. I mean, I can read stuff digitally now, and I'm not such a Luddite about it, but, this is like 10, 15 years ago. So somebody, I think my guitarist, in fact, showed it to me, and I went, well, that's great. When it's in a book, let me know. And he didn't, but I did find out. Eventually, Edpiscoura put those strips into a book. I think there's a couple that are comic book size, but most of them are Treasury edition size, which is a very big, oversized edition of a comic that they were very popular in the 70s. I own a ton of them because I love them, because they're really big and oversized, and the art's a lot bigger. And they look great. And so Edpiscoura's like a super Marvel guy, especially from that era, 70s and 80s. And so all the Hip Hop Family Tree comics look like that. So that made him really, really big. And as well it should. It's a brilliant comic book. Even if you're not into that era of hip hop, which I very much am. And even if you're not into that era of Marvel comics, I think the combination together, it's just fascinating stories, and he's really good. He tells them all in kind of like vignettes. And I don't know. I've bought them for a few people who don't read comics, but who do like rap music, and they seem to not care, which is kind of how it goes. So then, that's all I'm still warming up to this. Edpiscoura, like I say, is a very, very big Marvel fanatic, and just especially the X-Men. And it was clear in anything that he was doing that the X-Men were a big influence on him, and Chris Claremont in particular. So I think probably what happened was he was a big enough of an indie darling, and Marvel's always been very smart about recruiting indie guys. Not that DC is a complete slouch in this, but it always seemed to me like Marvel. Jonathan Lethem, the novelist Jonathan Lethem, would write stories with Marvel Comics references in them, and Marvel was like, "Do you want to write a comic book for us?" And he went, "Yeah, obviously I'm going to write Omega the Unknown, because that's the sort of thing that he's into." And so he did, and Farrell Dalrymple drew it, and nobody really read it, but it was really, really good. Omega the Unknown is kind of an obscure-ish 70s Marvel superhero created by Steve Gerber, and the series got canceled before Steve Gerber could really finish it. All kinds of bird walks tonight. As I mentioned last week, I'd been told that this whole little project of mine was becoming very opaque to some of my super comic book nerd friends, so I'm trying to be a little more, trying to explain things more to death. I think I'm doing okay so far. So I think what happened was Marvel went to Episcopal and was like, do you want to draw something for us? And he went, yeah, obviously. So he did this book called X-Men Grand Design. And it's essentially a retelling of the entire X-Men story from issue 1, really from before, because Apocalypse and all that stuff technically predates the Silver Age. And he said, like, as it was, you know, as he was gearing up to have it come out, it was like he draws a through line from X-Men #1 all the way to now. And it's so much fun. Especially for, because I'm also a big X-Men nerd. I don't know if I've mentioned that. And so it was great. It was, from what I remember, it was 3 2-issue series. The issues are very thick, as this one is. I don't know if you can tell. This is a $6 book. Now, it used for a long time, for the longest time, in fact, it's been $5 as kind of your higher end weekly book, and it's starting to inch its way up to $6. And I'm sure comics will be fucking $5 pretty soon. They've been $4 for a few years. I don't want to get down that road. So Grand Design was really good. I bought all the single issues, and then there were a couple Treasury editions, and I have the first one, I want to say. I'd like to have all 3, and they're not that hard to find. I just haven't gotten around to buying another edition of something I already own. But I guess it was enough of a success that they gave the idea to Tom Scioli to do the Fantastic Four Grand Design, which was only 2 issues, but which I opted to not buy just because at the time I was really trying to save, as opposed to, if it came out now, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Hence why I bought this. Now, Jim Rugg is not a name I'm familiar with. Tom Scioli, when he did the Fantastic Four Grand Design, which I do plan on reading eventually. Even though I didn't read it, I have read a lot of Tom Scioli's work, especially Godland, which was an extreme, and Tom Scioli's style in general is very Kirby-esque. So to give him the Fantastic Four thing made a lot of sense. Jim Rugg I'd meant to look up before I started this thing, but I'm curious as to whether or not what connection he might have to this. Oh, I've read some of his Street Angel, yeah. Oh, this guy's like my age. So now that makes sense. Piscora's actually a couple years younger than me, which depresses me no end. Yeah, he looks like another, like, more of an artiste. What do I know Street Angel from, though? I was on Slave Labor, but that was in the early aughts when I wasn't paying as much attention to the indies, sorry. And I did, like, webcomics and stuff. Yeah, I know Jim Rugg's name from something. I just couldn't tell you from what. So why they brought him in on the Hulk Grand Design, I don't know that either. And I went with a Piscor cover because it's been a while. Edpiscoura, and I think I've talked about it, although I don't think I've really gone into it. His current book is called Red Room, and it is a study of underground internet snuff sites, basically, where people, like on the dark web, will kill or torture, mutilate, and then finally kill people for money. That's sickos. And it's like, you know, he talks a lot in the back matter about how it's really horrific to him. That's the thing is there. That's why he's doing a book to kind of explore it. And I get all that. I'm good. I read he did a 4-issue series, and I read all those. And then a new one started recently, and I was like, I'm gonna pass. The torture porn thing has never been a thing. I don't like the films of, what's that idiot's name? The Bear Jew from Inglourious Bastards. I enjoy his performance in that film, but anything he's directed, I'll correct myself, I'm sure. That sort of thing, Hostel and all that shit, I never could get into it. I saw Cabin Fever when that came out. A buddy of mine dragged me to it, in fact. And P.U. So, yeah, the whole torture porn. I knew a lady that had a visceral reaction to any depictions of torture, right? And obviously not a real torture, but she would have to leave the room or the movie theater. I'm not that bad, but at the same time, it does make me pretty squeamish. So does all this yammering. Picks up last week, but up and up and up. So first up, I'll do this one because I read it the other day and now I don't remember anything. Oh, right. This was fun. This really exactly what I expected. Wolverine story from around when I was in 6th grade. I mean, I don't have much more to report from there. I will say that Larry Hama has not disappointed in years. Like, he did that Iron Fist Heart of the Dragon series not too long ago, which I think I had a similar reaction where I was kind of like, yeah, that's an Iron Fist book. But by the end, I was like, oh, wow, this is really good. So, I don't know. Also, which I just read moments ago because I've been very busy this week, we have Demons #1 by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. This was good. I'm looking forward to more because this wasn't that good. No, it was good. It was just very exposition heavy, which, and a first issue, that's not insane, especially when it comes to comics. Although I will say, I feel like the sort of postmodern in medias res way of telling stories is very alive and well in comics. In fact, this even does that. But I think that's the other thing. And I talked about how Scott Snyder blocked me on Twitter, and I don't want to get into all that again. But I'm not. When Scott Snyder is good, I really enjoy it. When he's not, I don't. This is good. This is better than Death of the Family, which I hated. But, and I don't know if this is him as a writer or just writers in general will kind of do this. You have an unreliable narrator. This is actually just a thing that I've gotten sick of in storytelling, and it happens in TV and movies and books and everything else. We have a narrator, and then there's the record scratch. Here's me. I bet you're wondering how I got to this. So we'll go back. Or that's the other thing too, is where they go. You'll start the story, and there's like, oh, she's gonna do what now? And then the character will go, you know what? I should back up. And then they start the story from there. And then, you know what, actually I should back up again. And it's like that to me, and maybe this is just me being overly critical or projecting, but to me, that's the writer going, all right, I don't want to start there. I'll start here. I don't want to, no, I'm gonna, you can erase the first couple things. I understand why they get it. Anyway. So our main character is like a college-age gal who has a complicated relationship with her father, who turns out is a demon hunter. I don't know if that's a reveal I should give away. I don't know. I think it's pretty much part of the story. It reminded me a lot, in fact, of that show. Now I can't think of that. There was a show, Reaper. It was like a WB show, and I think Kevin Smith had his hands. It had his fingerprints all over it for sure. And it was a show about a kid, normal suburban kid, turns 18, or maybe 21. And it turns out that his parents had sold his soul to the devil. It was something where like his mother had cancer or something, and they said they made a deal with the devil, and he said, I will take the soul of your firstborn. But they didn't plan on having children, and then oops. So the devil comes to collect, brilliantly played by Ray Price. Is that his name? No, Ray Price is Darth Maul. I'm gonna really feel stupid when I get this guy's name because he's one of my favorite actors, and he's very recognizable. John Landis is not in RoboCop. Ray Wise, not Ray Price. Ray Wise plays the devil, and it's like a WB show, and it's kind of played for laughs. But it was really a pretty good premise, and the devil's like, look, I don't want your soul. I got plenty of them. He goes, what I need is somebody to hunt down escaped souls from hell. So that's what this kid has to do. And I feel like this is like a similar thing. It's like, that's again, coming back to, it was just super exposition heavy, so going, and it goes all the way back to the beginning of time. Basically, demons are a real thing, and her father was a demon hunter, and now she has to be one. But it's Capullo art, which is, I don't think I talked about this much, and I may have mentioned it before. This is the thing about Greg Capullo that I always am still kind of taken aback by is that when I was a kid, he was a real hack. I mean, I don't mean to be that critical, but Greg Capullo broke into the industry by drawing Spawn, which was an extremely popular comic book created by Todd McFarlane, and largely because of the art. But since Todd McFarlane doesn't really like comics that much, as soon as he was able to kind of cash out, he did. And so I think he might draw a little bit more than he used to, but by the time Spawn was just into like the first couple years, all of a sudden Capullo's drawing it. I'm like, the only reason I was even buying this piece of shit, because Todd McFarlane writes like an artist, which is to say horribly. Brilliant artist, I won't argue that. I mean, I don't find his style quite as invigorating as I did as a child, but yeah, he's really good at drawing. He's as good at drawing as he is not good at writing. And then he quit drawing the books. It's like, what the fuck would I still read this? And Capullo at the time, bless his heart, was really, it was clear to me anyway at 16, because I knew everything, obviously. It was clear to me then that Capullo had been hired because he kind of looked like McFarlane, but it was a real pale imitation. He was no Eric Larson, I can tell you that. And then I didn't really think about it, and then fast forward, about 15 years, and all of a sudden he's got a completely different style. This actually happened a lot. There was guys like Dan Panosian and what's that guy's name? I'm not even going to try to look that up because I can't remember what crappy image book he drew. Dan Fraga. Oh, I did pull it. There was like a stable of guys at Image who were kind of like what you could call second generation Image guys. Image was a very popular comic book publisher, or remains a very popular publisher. But when they first were founded in the early 90s, it was by all these hot artists. And after the first couple years, boy, did they cool off considerably. Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld bailed, and Larson hung around and kept drawing Savage Dragon, but it just, the initial enterprise fell apart very quickly. The publisher stayed together and ended up doing really good stuff, and still does really good stuff. In fact, the next book I'll talk about is Image. But yeah, they had all these second wave guys like the names I mentioned come in and PU, but then they all got really good later, so that was worth it, wasn't it? So this is good. I'm looking forward to the next one though, because I want the story to, now I'm like, okay, I get the premise. And it was like a thicker issue, and it was $5, but then it has the whole script in the back. That's something else that I was reminded of this. I'd made this observation a while ago when I still was online, but every now and again, I mean, it's become standard now. Every time a new comic book starts, an indie comic book, it's just when a new Marvel or DC book, we all know why they're doing it. But with a new indie book, you'll often get the writer and or artist in the back pages going, hey, everybody, welcome to our book, and this is what we want to do, and this is that, and this. And I usually skip over all of it because I don't care what these guys have to say. If they're telling me a story, I'm all ears. But as soon as they just start talking about other things, I'm like, ugh. Brian K. Vaughan really did that. Brian K. Vaughan is one of these indie darlings, and his letters page in Saga was just... The problem I always have with that guy is that he's super pretentious, and that extends to his letters pages as well. So, yeah, they're always, there's like, well, here's why we're doing the comic book. And I go, I know why you're doing this comic book. It's because comics are fun. Just shut up. You don't need to explain to me why. And then they put the whole script. And I think they were trying to just justify. There were more pages of story than you would find in a thinner comic, obviously. But it was a lot of filler. And comic scripts are really boring to read. I don't know if you've ever looked at one. I have not written a lot of comics because the scripting part of it is way boring. And I'm not good at drawing. But you know who is Nick Dragata. I also read Ghost Cage #1. This was pretty fun. Very east of west. I also noticed for the first time, really, how influenced by anime and manga Nick Dragata is. And I have a very blind spot when it comes to that kind of artwork. Something of a complicated plot, but not as bad as East of West. You have this character whose name I've already forgotten. It's in the far-flung future, and basically, I'm trying to really thumbnail this because I'm already at a half hour. Far-flung future, and there's this massive tower, and he keeps the whole world running, electricity, right? So energy comes from conflict. So this guy has given birth to this character called Sam, who's like part of the thing, and he has to go and fight, and then this is his tech support. It's hard to explain when you've been doing this for half an hour and you're already kind of bored, but it's really good. It's really good Nick Dragata art. Now that I'm actually under a little better light, it's $6 and black and white, but again, that's the manga for you. Yeah, it's very manga heavy, but in a way, like, I don't like manga or anime. I don't particularly care for that style of comic art. I'm very American, very Marvel Comics oriented. But even I read a lot of other comics and European stuff and, you know, Latin America stuff and everybody's comics are. I'll read any comic, frankly. You put it in front of me, but the Japanese stuff, for whatever reason, holds the least interest for me. But in a way that, like, if a band I like covers a song I don't care for, I'll grow to like the song. I feel like Dragata doing a manga here is going to make me appreciate it more. Oh, what a load off. Everyone's minds. All right, that's enough for this week. Okay. I do apologize for the sound quality. I always forget to pack a microphone. I'll bring a bullhorn next time. Now, the neighbors will not care for that.